Portland Bird Observatory was the focus of attention on the 14th of October, with the discovery of a northern water thrush in the Ob's garden. This was the first twitchable water thrush to be seen on the mainland, most previous records having been on the Isles of Scilly. This New World warbler is reminiscent of a tiny redwing as it forages in the leaf litter. Leaning over a wall to take these pictures, at times the water thrush was only a few feet in front of me. Unfortunately, the 14th was a very wet, dark afternoon, making filming under the trees a real test of the camera's low light capabilities. This great knot on Seal Sands was quickly renamed the Great Dot by many who saw it at extremely long range from Seaton Snook. I considered this sequence, taken at 200 times magnification, to be the best that I was likely to obtain. Fortunately, towards the end of its stay, it was found feeding on the beach at Brandsands, where these close-ups were obtained. The bird was an adult, molting from its distinctive summer plumage. In this species, the molt is largely accomplished in winter quarters, so that migrating adults are usually in mainly summer plumage. After first being seen on the 13th of October, it remained, usually distant, until early November. These sequences were taken on the 5th of November, which was apparently the last day the great knot was seen. On this day, the bird was feeding with redshanks in the dry sand at the top of the beach. News of a first winter indigo bunting on Ramsey Island had about 300 bedraggled twitchers waiting for boats the next day. Frustratingly, the blustery southerly wind prevented sailings until about 2 p.m, when the wind had swung round to the southwest. A continuous shuttle managed to get everyone across by about 4:30, so everyone had good views of this obliging transatlantic vagrant. The amount of blue in the tail and wing coverts suggested that it was a first-year male, unlike the only previous record, which concerned an adult male in Norfolk in October 1988. Yet another megatick in October. This immature male, little bustard, graced the area around Lizard Village in Cornwall for 4 days, from the 26th. It was extremely shy and flighty, just like the last twitchable one in Hampshire, nearly 9 years ago. In flight, the amount of white in the wing shows the bird to be a male, but the lack of a short 7th primary rules out an adult male. It is this peculiarly shaped, short 7th primary which produces the whistling flight of the adult male. Potentially a first record for Britain, this first winter drake canvasback was first seen on the 18th of January.
Back onto us, swimming away from us now. The bird just come up to the right. You got it?
It regularly commuted between Welney Wildfowl Reserve and Wissington Sugar Factory lakes until the end of January. These shots show the bird at Wissington, viewed from the road. News of a male little crake at Bow Beach Reservoir near Sevenoaks on Sunday the 23rd of March soon had hordes of birders flocking to this site. Fortunately, this obliging bird continued to perform well for most of the day, although it did occasionally disappear into thicker vegetation.
Anybody else want a scope view?
differences from Baillon's crake include the small red spot at the base of the bill, less prominent barring on the flanks, and the greenish legs, which would be brownish or flesh coloured in Baillon's. The last universally twitchable bird was the incredibly tame female at Cuckmere Haven in March 1985. Perhaps it is only the showy birds that are observed, and the more normal skulking individuals often go undetected. The biggest surprise at Landguard Nature Reserve in late April was this fine male spectacled warbler, only the second accepted record for Britain. The last day of May produced the first twitchable collared flycatcher for many years. A great many birders made the long trek to northeast Scotland to see this bird on the 1st of June. It was considered to be a first summer male by its brown flight feathers, but otherwise it looked just like an adult male. The Spanish sparrow, which had been present in Cumbria since July 1996, was again advertising his presence from Nuke House at Waterside Village. This extreme rarity in Britain was a welcome diversion after seeing the roller at Lochaber Loch. Although the poor bird sang his heart out, he seemed unable to attract a mate. Possibly all of the female house sparrows were already paired up. News of a possible semi-palmated plover at Dawlish Warren in June caused a mass twitch to see the bird. Notice the webs between the toes, especially the larger one between the middle and outer toes. Winged plovers show no webbing between the toes. Although some plumage features do appear to differ from similar aged winged plovers, there is no single conclusive feature other than the palmations between the toes. I did not hear the bird call at all, but was assured by reliable sources that the call was definitely diagnostic of semi-palmated plover. Notice the wider breast band on this juvenile winged plover. This summer plumaged sand plover on the Church Norton side of Pagham Harbour was initially identified as a greater sand plover. This was mainly due to early observers claiming that its feet projected beyond its tail in flight. Later photographs clearly show that this was not so. It was often at long range, through a shimmering heat haze. I can honestly say that everyone that I spoke to who had seen this bird could not understand why it was not a lesser sand plover of the western Atriphons race. It therefore came as no surprise when it was officially identified as a lesser about 2 weeks later. The most obvious features in favour of lesser sand plover are the small stubby bill, the almost completely black forehead, and the dark legs, lacking any hint of green. The fact that the bird was in pristine summer plumage was another pointer to lesser, since greater sand plovers of the western race usually molt into winter plumage before migration, whereas lessers do not molt until in winter quarters. There are, of course, always exceptions to this rule. On Friday, the 15th of August, when these sequences were recorded, the bird was feeding just under 100 yards away on the mud flats. A magnification of 100 times was found to be the best compromise between image size and magnified heat haze. Separation of western and semi-palmated sandpipers in winter plumage is a very difficult process. Thus this bird, although probably present at Musselburgh since late July, was not identified as a western sandpiper until mid-August. Fortunately, it remained in the area until the 25th of August, commuting between Musselburgh and Adelaide Bay. All of these sequences were taken at Adelaide Bay on the 22nd of August. The roosting bird was filmed in the early morning at high tide, and the feeding bird was recorded in the early evening as the tide was rushing back in. Differences in light made the bird look either grey or brown on the upper parts. It constitutes only the 6th record for Britain. Scratching its bill. A molting adult stilt sandpiper was present at Minsmere RSPB Reserve from the 7th to the 13th of September. Quite a late date for this usually early migrant. It was a very popular attraction, especially since several years have passed without a twitchable bird. The bird was in mainly summer plumage, with just the head and neck showing molt to winter plumage. On the 3rd of November, this first winter steppe grey shrike was found near Long Buckby in Northamptonshire. This form of grey shrike is now generally regarded as a distinct species, although it was previously lumped with great grey shrike. There have been about 11 previous records in Britain of steppe grey shrike. This adult canvasback was undoubtedly the same bird which initially appeared at Welney as a first winter between January and March 1997. It reappeared at Welney in early December and remained on the flooded washes until late February. Throughout most of this time it associated with the large gathering of pochard in front of the main hide, giving excellent close views. This bird had obviously attached itself to the pochard flock and was frequently seen displaying to female pochard. As well as the obvious head shape, notice the very dark coloration of the head and neck, contrasting sharply with the very pale back and sides. It is also a noticeably larger bird than the accompanying pochard. This bird left with most of the pochard on the 22nd of February. Like many of the previous 20 British records, this dark-eyed junco was found visiting garden bird tables. Although it had been present on the east side of Chester since at least mid-December, news did not get out until mid-January. From then on, hordes of birders visited this site, up until the 19th of April, when the bird was last seen. The brown edges to the tertials and greater coverts indicate that this is a first winter bird, possibly a female, although sexing is rather difficult in first winter plumage. The last twitchable birds were at Portland and Church Crookham in 1989 and 1990 respectively. This adult female two-barred crossbill was found in the Forest of Dean on the 15th of February. It was associating with common crossbills as they came to drink at a pond on the edge of the New Fancy View car park. Although it spent most of the day feeding elsewhere, it would periodically return to this area to drink. As well as the size and shape of the white wing bars, notice the shape of the white tertial tips and the relatively small bill. Although some common crossbills show thin wing bars and white tertial tips, They are never as distinctively shaped as on two-barred crossbill. This common nighthawk on St Mary's was first seen on the 12th of September in the Green Farm area at the northeast end of the island. It closely followed the record of a male nighthawk on St Agnes, which unfortunately died on the 14th. This later bird performed very well over the Borough Farm area on Friday the 18th of September, resulting in a relatively small twitch the next day. This was when these sequences were taken in the Borough Farm area. In fine sunny weather, the bird was hawking insects high in the air with swallows and house martins. The hirundines frequently chased and harassed the bird. It is difficult to say whether this was an adult female or a first winter bird. The pale fringes to the primaries cannot be seen in these flight shots, but the throat patch looks rather clean and white rather than buff. News of this long-staying white thrush only got out on the 23rd of October, although the bird had been present since the 14th. It was frequenting gardens around the village of Tolster on the Isle of Lewis, Outer Hebrides.
That's what it's doing, to disturb the leaf litter.
Yeah, wobbling itself.
Yeah.
Although it gave excellent flight views, it was, as usual, very difficult to see on the ground. Although I would have liked better shots of this bird, in the end I was happy to settle for these sequences of this very difficult species. These sequences were taken on the 26th of October, although we did see the bird again on the 27th.
Let's turn around again.
It seems to move up that back bit as well.
Hopefully it's going to come out from the light.
Whilst I was videoing the pied-billed grebe, this splendid rose-breasted grosbeak was also found on Briar. It was a first winter bird, showing the crimson wing linings of a male. After an initial wait, everyone eventually had very close views of this bird as it gorged on blackberries just south of the quay. The bird showed some pink patches on the breast, but it was difficult to say whether these were pink feathers or merely blackberry staining on the buffish breastband. The last occurrences on Scilly were in 1993 and 1987. There have been about 18 British records of this summer visitor to North America. 10 of these have been on Scilly, all in October.
It's got that middle to it on this side.
This first one's definitely like them. It's a different colour.
I actually think that might be a bit of feather in that bright red on its tail.
This Blythe's pipit looked very dark in wet and windy weather on the morning of the 24th of November. On this morning, 2 birds were present in the top fields at Portland. In the afternoon the rain stopped and the sun came out, giving perfect viewing conditions. Only 1 bird remained in the top fields, giving excellent views. Notice the pattern of white on the outer 2 tail feathers. On Richard's pipit, the inner one of the 2 shows a lot more white than on this bird. The length of the hind claw can be seen in this next freeze frame. It is not nearly as long as on Richard's pipit, shown here for Note also how the underparts are completely buff, lacking the white belly of Richard's pipit. This drake Bufflehead was found at Rodford Reservoir near Oakhampton on the 20th of November. It was usually associating with one or two golden eyes in the northeast arm of the reservoir. The bird's plumage was immaculate, complete with purple and green sheen to the forehead. The locality and date seemed to favour a genuine transatlantic vagrant, particularly as there had been a fall of American birds on the Isles of Scilly in late October. This first winter male black-throated thrush was first seen on a housing estate called Woodlands Park on Christmas Day. This bird quickly adapted to close contact with the people on the housing estate and became very confiding as it feasted on the cotoneaster berries. It showed extremely well on this low shrub at the side of someone's front door. Their food at this time of year consists mainly of berries, but earthworms are also readily taken. Although several individuals have lingered in recent winters, this species could well return to its formerly rare and erratic status. At times the bird was seen quietly singing, but because of the windy conditions the sound could not be picked up. The biggest surprise of the spring was a twitchable crag martin, well inland at Swithland Reservoir near Leicester on the 17th of April. Although it gave superb views from the dam, I struggled to capture just these few frames of video because the bird's flight was just too fast and erratic to follow, even with a handheld camera. These few still frames enable you to pick out the salient field characters of this species.
Coming towards us.
The first twitchable slender-billed gull since 1987 was a surprise find in Kent on the 5th of May. Although it spent the first day at Grove Ferry, it then transferred to Monk's Wall Nature Reserve near Sandwich, where these sequences were obtained. Viewing from the road embankment, the bird was often fairly distant. It was an adult bird with a delicate salmon pink flush to its underparts. The 12th British record of greater sand plover was this fine summer plumaged male at John Muir Country Park in East Lothian. It was present on the 6th and 7th of June, enabling several hundred birders to see it. At first glance, this bird looked very similar to the lesser sand plover of 1997, particularly the black forehead and dark line along the top of the breastband. However, its large size, long heavy bill and long pale legs were overriding features for greater sand plover. Note also that the orange breastband does not extend onto the flanks, as in lesser. This bird fed on the sand flats with ringed plovers at low tide, and moved to the grassy salt marsh with them at high tide. This male Baillon's crake was first heard calling at Grove Ferry in mid-June, but was not identified positively until the 22nd. Although very elusive at first, it eventually gave excellent close views around its favoured marshy pool. Even when being elusive, the clicking song gave the bird's presence away, as it was used throughout the day. This was the first really twitchable Baillon's crake since the confiding Sunderland bird of 1989. It remained until at least the 20th of July.
A second record of elegant tern in Ireland was a surprise discovery on the 8th of July. Although I do not personally regard Ireland as part of my British list, I was tempted by the relatively inexpensive trip to see a new species of bird. Ladies Island Lake is only a few miles from the ferry terminal at Rosslare. On our arrival, the bird soon appeared amongst the sandwich terns on the island. Although the island is quite some distance away, I was able to employ high magnification to obtain these pictures.
Got a question now, Lee.
Moving slightly right, there's walking. Approaching the right hand post to the right. Walking.
Note the yellow towards the bill tip, the eye surrounded by black, and the white tail and rump, which contrast with the grey mantle. News of a short-billed dowitcher in northeast Scotland caused probably the biggest twitch of the year on the 14th of September. Hundreds of birders journeyed through the night to be at Rose Hearty by dawn. The bird duly appeared in the half-light of dawn and performed superbly for all. Indeed, it was set to stay for a further 10 days, before flying south to Teesside for a further protracted stay. This bird was initially identified as a long-billed dowitcher on the 11th of September, after poor views in bad light. In good light, the barred tertials and inner greater coverts are obvious. Another pointer to short-billed is the choice of feeding habitat. Short-billed seems to prefer intertidal mud, whereas long-billed frequently choose freshwater pools and rivers. The biggest surprise of the year must have been this juvenile short-toed eagle on Scilly for 5 days in October. Although there have been previous claims, this was the first substantiated record for Britain. This shot of the eagle perched on Great Ganilly was taken from Highertown on St Martin's. It shows the species' characteristically large head. giving it an owl-like appearance when perched. On the 7th of October, this bird was seen to fly in over St Agnes and St Mary's before finally settling on Great Gunilly in the Eastern Isles. Organised boat trips around Great Gunilly were usually rewarded with excellent flight views of the bird. Unfortunately, a rocking boat is the worst possible base for supporting a high magnification video camera, so these sequencers were taken from the eastern end of St Martin's. This bird was constantly mobbed by the resident pair of peregrines and 2 pairs of ravens. After 2 days of dull, drizzly weather, Monday the 11th of October saw clearing skies and rising temperatures. The great bird soared to an estimated 1,000 feet over Tresco before heading off southeast. These few freeze frames make it easier to study the bird's plumage. Oddly enough, on the same day that the short-toed eagle appeared, so did this juvenile upland sandpiper. It favoured the outer perimeter of the airfield, especially the area near the windsock, which is where these sequences were recorded. Although fairly regular on Scilly, this species is extremely rare elsewhere. This yellow-billed cuckoo around Tresco Great Pool was at least some compensation for dipping on a blue rock thrush on the 16th of October. Note how the yellow on the bill is difficult to see at this angle. Although elusive at times, it was present from the 12th to the 20th of October. A juvenile least sandpiper was a good crowd puller at Blacktoft Sands from the 18th to the 23rd of October. The bird's rich, rufous brown upper parts were a noticeable feature, but notice also the forehead pattern, which I think resembles broad-billed sandpiper. This bird was extremely active, running around and pecking away at a frantic pace.
Where are you doing? Where are you working? Local authority.
So you get your attempts of bolting.
An unprecedented influx of chimney swifts occurred from the 22nd of October onwards. No doubt whisked here by the fast-moving Atlantic depression which arrived on the 21st. This bird over Millbrook village was the first to be discovered, followed by about 12 other records. The only way to show this species on video is to slow the flight down. Note how the white throat is accentuated by the dark eyebrow, and the blunt tail makes the body look distinctly cigar-shaped. Amazingly, there were only 5 British records before this influx, so the total after 1999 will go up to about 18. In another unprecedented influx, about 10 pallid swifts were discovered, mainly scattered along the east coast of England. This bird at Flamborough Head was found on the 25th of October and remained until the 28th. During most of the day, it spent its time well out high over the sea, but in the late afternoon especially it came in close to the cliffs, giving excellent close views. Notice the rather blunt blackish wingtips, which contrast with the paler inner wings. Before this influx, there were only 13 previous British records, spread over the last 21 years. As with the chimney swift, slow motion has been used to give a more watchable picture of this difficult to film species. Although initially reported on the 26th of October, it was another 5 days before this pale morph booted eagle revealed itself to the masses.
The tips of the prongs slightly upturned, that was all.
It wandered as far as Porthgwarra and Marazion, but favoured the area to the northeast of Drift Reservoir. The car park at Drift is a good vantage point to look over this area, and is where these sequences were recorded from. Notice the diagnostic landing lights. These are white patches at the base of each wing when viewed from the front. They are shown by both pale and dark morph birds. Booted eagle is a small eagle, similar in size to common buzzard. This bird was aged as a juvenile in its second calendar year, and was apparently the same bird which wandered north through Ireland earlier in the year. The bird's presence was often given away by a flock of mobbing corvids. These freeze frames are provided to make it easier to study the bird's plumage. On my first visit, this first winter ivory gull was roosting on the caravan park at Southwold. This was the only day that it was seen at Southwold. It was first glimpsed at Oldborough on the 5th of December, but then not again until late on the 7th. Thereafter it was seen daily and regularly frequented the shingle beach at Oldborough. It was very confiding and often hung around the fishermen looking for scraps of fish. First winter birds are very variable in the amount of black on the face and wings. This particular bird had relatively little black. Unfortunately, on the 12th of December, the bird became entangled in a fisherman's line, giving some anxious moments as it was reeled in. Mercifully, it was released with only slight feather damage to its right wing. A soarer, which was found in Devon on the 18th of January, was only the 12th British record. It was also the first one to be seen in Britain in more than 8 years, and only the second ever twitchable mainland record. It obviously found the habitat very suitable, in spite of being chased off by both moorhen and water rail, and stayed for over 2 months at this locality. It was last seen on the 9th of April. These are my best shots, which were obtained in March, during a trip to Cornwall to see the white gyrfalcon. Note the diagnostic white spot at the back of the eye. These sequences were taken in the late afternoon, with only half a dozen people present. The Cornish booted eagle reappeared in Somerset in early February, after an absence of about 2 months. Perhaps it spent that time wandering around the many wooded valleys of Devon, before finally emerging at Mere and Westhay Heaths in Somerset. It moved again to Chew Valley Lake from the 11th to the 15th, resulting in a mass twitch on Sunday, the 13th of February. After a long wait from dawn, the bird finally emerged to give excellent overhead flight views. In the afternoon, the bird caught a moorhen on the lake shore and proceeded to devour it in full view of the watching crowd. Unfortunately, the best viewing position was looking directly into the sun, giving poor light for videoing.
chance of somebody more in, isn't it?
This highly mobile bird was subsequently reported from South Devon in March, Kent and Essex in April, and Orkney in June. With no further sightings this year, it would seem that this individual has finally departed. A very obliging desert warbler turned up on Sammy's Point near Spurn on the 7th of May. As with all previous records, it was the greyer eastern race, although at times the bright sunshine made it look as rufous as the North African race. This species was last seen in Britain in May 1993, when a male sang and built a nest on Blakeney Point, Norfolk. All of the other 9 records related to birds in October to December, mainly along the English east and south coasts. The 7-year gap meant that many relative newcomers to twitching needed this bird for their list. Although this species is a ground feeder in its normal semi-desert home, this bird was not seen on the ground at all. All of its food seemed to be seized in the foliage of the low shrubs. After a frustratingly difficult bird in Kent on the 6th of May, this alpine accenter in Suffolk on the 13th was most obliging. Being found early on a Saturday morning, it was able to be enjoyed by birders from near and far. In typical alpine accenter fashion, it showed well at close range, even down to a few feet at times. Note the dark spotted white throat patch, which can be difficult to see. In males, this patch is larger and wider at its lower end. After dipping on the male blue rock thrush last year, I was very grateful for this female at Pendeen from the 14th to the 18th of May. It was shy and unapproachable, much like the birds in southern Europe. These sequences were therefore all obtained with high magnification. This bird is obviously a female rock thrush, but note the very long black bill and the lack of any rufous tones in the tail. These features and the all dark upper parts identify the bird as a female blue rock thrush. In full direct sunshine, the underparts looked much brighter than they usually appear. Black-eared wheatears are rare and irregular visitors to Britain. They are usually seen as overshooting migrants in spring. This first summer male of the pale-throated form was present at Upton Heath in Dorset on the 25th and 26th of June. A rather late date for an overshooting spring migrant. This species is inexplicably rare in Britain, considering that it breeds as close as southern France. It is now less regular than pied wheatear, which breeds much further away. The solitary sandpiper remains one of the rarest Nearctic waders to reach Britain. Although there are about 27 previous records, few of these are very recent. All of the recent twitchable records have been on the Isles of Scilly, just like this bird, which was found on the 22nd of September. As expected, it was a juvenile, and it settled in for a protracted month-long stay. Note the very long wings projecting beyond the tail and giving the bird a long appearance. Britain's sixth cliff swallow was present on St Mary's from the 28th of September until the 1st of October and attracted a mass twitch on Saturday the 30th of September. This brief shot was obtained as it sailed over Porthalick Pool. By using slow motion and freeze frames, more plumage detail can be observed, such as the pale rump. Notice the pale central area of the underwings and the square-cut tail.